have 9:01. Welcome, everybody. The clock up there is woefully unreliable, so. We'll get started. This is the Senate Education Committee. And the first bill we have to deal with this morning is 421. Relative to dual and concurrent enrollment for career and technical education center students. The prime sponsor is unable to be here, so Senator Prentice will introduce the bill.
Good morning, Chair Ward and members of the Senate Education Committee. Again, as the chair said, I am stepping in today for Senator Waters from District 4 to introduce Senate Bill 421. This is relative to the dual and concurrent enrollment for career and technical education center students. This bill will do one thing. First of all, what we know is that this is a current program and that it's been successful. But this is going to provide clarifications that are necessary. One clarification will be what the defining successful completion, and the second will be about students outside of public schools' access to the program. So that's, with that, I will turn this over to, is it Beth that's going to be here today? Okay, Beth from the Community College System of New Hampshire. Unless you have any questions for me, I'd like to turn it over to Beth, Senator Ward.
That's,
Unless you, Beth.
well,
Jordan.
I have other people here, but we can certainly start with
Oh,
that.
when you're ready, okay.
Yeah.
It's your call. Thank you very much. I'm all set.
Thank you. I don't see Senator Reagan is not here. No, well, you're listing 421. Beth, no, you're on.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We would like to thank our sponsor, Senator Waters, and the many other sponsors for bringing this bill forward at our request. I'm Beth Doran. I'm the Director of College Access Programs, the Community College System of New Hampshire. I'm going to speak off this written testimony for a bit, but feel free to ask me some questions as we go along if I don't address it fully. Many of you may know that the Community College System of New Hampshire administers a few different dual and concurrent enrollment programs that allow high school students to take college courses while they were still in high school. With RSA 188 that came into play 4 or 5 years ago, it also allows for high school students to take STEM courses and more recently CTE courses, up to 2 of them, at no cost to those students per year. Our programs have served well over 8,000 students annually, and these programs allow students to take these programs, or these courses, I should say, at a very, very low cost or no cost to them at all. The first couple changes, we have 2 changes that we're requesting here in support of. The first changes what triggers the funding from successful completion to actual enrollment. Enrollment is actually more in line with our standard payment practices, and we hope to see that we'd be able to move to the enrollment versus the successful completion standard. The second is a bill that allows students outside the public schools to have access to this program. When RSA 188 was first brought into play, we interpreted the language school districts in it to mean that students needed to be part of a school district in order to access these funds. And further analysis, so initially those students were not eligible, students in private schools were not eligible to participate or take advantage of the scholarship program that it offered them, of the 2 courses at no cost to high school students. So as I said, upon further analysis, these 200 to 300 students per year who are in private schools do not have access to the STEM and CTE scholarship. And in retrospect, in looking at the language, those students were actually included, but our interpretation has excluded them from this funding up until now. We very much believe that these students, these New Hampshire students in private schools, are very much part of New Hampshire's ecosystem and communities. And we want to keep them here in New Hampshire, if at all possible, and hoping that this may help us do that to some degree. We really see no reason why these students, the private school students, should be ineligible from the scholarship program. Pretty much, we thank you for your consideration of these changes, And we, over time, the CCS&H dual and concurrent enrollment programs have really evolved over time. We've had to make small changes as needed as we move along with them, as the program grows and continues to grow. And we believe that these changes will assist us in better administering these dual and concurrent enrollments to from both our colleges to our New Hampshire high school population.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Senator Carr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Doran, thank you. Is it Dr. Doran?
No, I wish it was, but
I'm sorry. That was
didn't get there yet.
not for the record. You've made clear the number of students potential, at least you've given us a range on the private school side. On the enroll to complete, can you give us an idea of what that ratio is and how many students that might be?
I would say potentially 200 or more students don't actually successfully complete the program. Is that your question? How many?
Well, it's both.
Yep.
It's both the number and the ratio.
Yeah, so I don't have an actual number of students that don't, but I would assume that, I know the cost, it was about $20,000 in funding of those scholarships that we provided that we were not able to access. So I would say that would be about 200 or so students.
Out of how many, if I might?
We have about 8,000 students that are involved in the dual and concurrent enrollment programs annually.
Okay, 2.5%, I guess.
I'm sorry?
2.5%, I guess. Thank you very
You
much.
may be better at percentages than I, but yes, I will defer to you on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I just have a clarifying question. So you said just 8,000 students are involved in the dual and concurrent enrollment? Are
Approximately, yes.
they, at this point, mostly public school students?
Well, yes. Well, that includes private school students, but those students are not able to access that STEM and CTE scholarship.
Okay,
So yes, it includes the private school
okay,
students.
thank you very much. I don't see any other questions.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
can I
Did
ask-
you have a follow-up?
Well, yeah, it's a different question, but we're here, and I'm curious of, do we have a conversion rate of how many of these students wind up attending a New Hampshire school, either the community college system or university system,
That's a great question.
or anywhere in New Hampshire?
I can speak to the community college system, how many actually matriculate into our programs. I don't know about the university system, but we've found over time, over a study of 2 to 3 years, that about 20% of those students who are taking these dual and concurrent enrollment courses actually end up at our colleges, which is actually consistent with national figures as well. We're looking to improve upon that, but it's about 18 to 20% annually.
Thank you.
Senator Shardy?
Good morning.
Tony?
So the students that take this, I assume that they have to check with whatever college, if it's not staying here, if it's transferable for their credits. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So my son graduated from public high school in 2015. He took these courses, and they did transfer, which was really nice.
Great, that's good to hear. Yes, we tell students often when we're presenting these programs to them that they should be checking with if they are looking to transfer them to another institution, that they should check with that institution first to ensure that they can be transferred. But in the past, we've done an analysis of colleges and universities across the country that do accept these credits, and it's over 200 colleges and universities that accept our credits from these programs.
Thank you.
Did you have another question, Senator Carr?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else out there who would like to testify to this bill? Yes. Welcome.
Good morning, Members of the committee, for the record, my name is Diana Fenton. I'm an attorney with the Department of Education. And just very briefly, I apologize for being contrary to the speaker who just testified, but the department is concerned about the proposed language in the first paragraph, the enrolls in language. And the concern from the department is administrative in nature, in terms of paying the cost, because the term enrolls in would require the department, in theory, to pay for students who might not complete the course. And so that is why the department has some concerns. Again, the department does not testify in support or in opposition, simply provides technical assistance. But due to our administrative process and paying for things, the successful completion language, which was in the original bill from the department's standpoint, is the more appropriate language. The enrolls in language would cause administrative problems at the department level.
So you would like to have that back in the bill? Completes?
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Senator Prentice, you have a question for Ms. Fenton?
Oh, I apologize.
Your mic.
I almost didn't.
I know.
Yeah.
It's all right. Thank you for taking my question. So I want to flip this around a little bit differently. There are times when public dollars follow students to private schools, and we're looking at this almost like in an opposite direction. So is there an enrollment versus successful completion standard held there? So if I'm, let's say I'm taking an EFA and I'm going to a private school, do the funds, funding goes with me to that school, and what happens if I don't successfully complete or I drop out? Do I have to pay that money back? I mean, I want to level the playing field all around. So
Sure.
it might be a technical consideration that we can work on offline, but
I
like a
think it
parity
is a
issue.
technical consideration to work offline on, and I think the programs are very different in a lot of respects, and I understand your concern. I think everyone here likes that idea of even level playing fields. I think my testimony today is really just limited to the bill that's in front of us and recognizing that this change in language, while I can certainly understand the intent behind it and the positive intent behind it, would cause some issues at the department in terms of being able to fulfill that. And I think there would be some significant backlog because the department would end up paying for students who would not have successful completion. And I understand that concern, that very general concern, can translate to other programs. And I'm happy to have that conversation with you offline.
absolutely. So,
follow up?
thank you, Senator Ward. Just might I suggest that we have a conversation with the prime sponsor, David Waters, who wasn't here this morning, to try to rectify that.
Sure.
Okay,
I'd be happy to do that. I appreciate the opportunity.
thank you. Diana Fenton?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Oh,
if I might.
Senator Khan?
Thank you. Good morning.
good morning.
This may be unfair because you may not know the answer to the question, but
I love those questions.
yeah, you can take them back to somebody that might. But on the chance that you do, why would this be more complicated for the department? If we know who's completing the credits, we must know who is registered in the course as well. I'm not understanding
The ultimate concern.
yeah.
I mean, I can certainly get you a more detailed explanation, but I can tell you that this language was flagged, and I think if you look at it and you put it into practice, right, because that's where we identify flaws in the law, is when we put them into practice. On paper, it looks great. But when someone is enrolled in a course, when would that require payment from the department? And then how would that payment, if successful completion is not done, how would that payment be returned? Would that payment be returned? At what point would all of the funding be returned? And so I think the administration of it becomes more complex. And as always, the department is willing to work with our partners. We enjoyed working with our partners at the upstart of this program. And so we can certainly do that, but I would suggest that this language causes unrecognized complexities, which might thwart the program in some ways that are unanticipated. And we would hate to see that happen. I think this is a great time to kind of massage that language so that it would work appropriately.
Any other questions?
I just encourage you to, and Ms. Doran has her
Yes,
hand up
I
back there.
see
But it's mysterious to, if you can do the one, you can't, to not be able to do the other. But I'll wait for the results of your conversations.
Well, for many reasons, they don't put me in charge of the money at the Department of Education, but I'm happy to get those details. And as always, the department is happy to work with our partners on this.
All set? Ms. Stoyron? You had some? You need to come up to the microphone, please.
Just to clarify a few things, when the RSA 188 first came into play, the Department of Education actually held the funds, and we needed to invoice the Department of Ed on a twice a year, basically. What then, as of last year, I believe it was, the DOE had asked us to just take over the funds ourselves, so that we hold them in separately, and then access those funds as students right now as they successfully complete the program. Moving to the enrollment phase, so the Department of Education really isn't involved in the administration of the program at all. It all is with the community college system. So it's far less complicated for us to be able to see that students who are enrolled in the program, we can then access those funding for the enrollments versus at the end of the year, looking at who successfully completed the program, which we defined back when this program first came into play as a C or better. So students were required to get a C or better, keeping in mind that when the program was first began, that C or better was supposed to be reimbursable. So the students were going to be able to pay for the course up front, and then if they received a C or better, then they would be reimbursed those funds. The Department of Education had requested that we not do it on a reimbursement basis, that instead we just award the scholarships, and then upon successful completion, we were able to draw down those funds. So being able to draw down those funds after enrollment purposes and not having to go back and determine if students have successfully completed with the C or better, keeping in mind that these courses are taught in the high school by the high school teachers. So we don't really have any impact on whether or not these students successfully complete. It is really up to the high school teacher to work with these students to help them successfully complete the program. We do have our faculty who are involved with the high schools and guiding them to ensure that the programs that the courses that they are offering are indeed of college quality, but it is really up to the high school teacher to work with the students to help them successfully pass. And in essence, allowing us to draw down these funds, or to at least be able to access these funds upon the term of enrollment versus successful completion, is much cleaner for us and does not require us to go back and forth to determine who has successfully passed this course with a C or better or not. And the other thing that I just wanted to clarify too regarding the private schools is that the students in the private schools that we are referring to are actually schools like Concord Christian Academy, Bishop Brady, Trinity, and Manchester. These are not schools where students are moving into the state to take courses from a private school. So it's very specific and small. It's probably 4 or 5 high schools, private schools total, that actually have students that are participating in this program.
Senator Prentice?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ward. So if I may, what were the conversations with the department? Because I'm hearing, maybe I heard you say, I want to be clear on this, that you were acting in part on the wishes of the department to clarify this, but I hear Diana Fenton's concern, so.
It began with, just to make sure we're all on the same page and hopefully clarify, when RSA 188 first came into play, it was supposed to be on a reimbursement basis. So students were supposed to take these CTE and STEM courses, pay for them upon enrollment, and then once they completed the course with a C or better, then we would reimburse them those funds that had been put out to pay for that course. At that time, and this happened the very first year, at that time, the Commissioner of Education was concerned that students would not be able to afford to pay that $150 or however much it was in order to take that course in order to be reimbursed. He thought it was a barrier for students to be taking a course if they had to pay for it up front when they may not be able to afford it. So we agreed and determined that we wouldn't do it on a reimbursement basis, but instead students would just be allowed to sign up for the course for free. But then we wouldn't be able to be reimbursed until they successfully completed with the C or better. So that's how the program ran for the first year. The Department of Education administered it. We invoiced them twice a year, once in January and once in June, for those students who had successfully complete. I believe it was 2 years after the initiation of the program that the Department of Education requested that they not be involved in the administration of the program, and that CCS&H, because they were really just a go-between for the funding, and that CCS&H just be able to access that funds on their own, and that's where it stands right now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ward.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Anybody else who has anything to add to this particular bill? If not, we'll close the session on 4/21. Okay, what do we have? We have the next one, which is we'll open up the session on 453, Senate Bill 453. And the prime sponsor, yeah. Well, we can hold off that one and take another one.
I just passed him in his office, so
Here he is. Perfect timing.
Ready?
Yes. So Senator Sherman will introduce Senate Bill 453.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some extra copies of the amendment.
I've got plenty of
I
them.
don't know if... Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've never spent so much time in education as this session, so I'm thrilled to be back. Senate Bill 453, I affectionately call Jean's bill, which is kind of weird because my father's name is Bill and my mother's name is Jean. But my mother was a child therapist, and always like to say that she made all her mistakes on the four of us and went on, got her degree, and went out and helped the rest of the world. But the bottom line is she used to run one of the largest nursery schools in Connecticut. It had over 100 children in it. And through her influence on me, I've grown through the years to appreciate how much impact a robust early childhood experience can have. And that has been borne out by the research literature on early childhood education. And I think there's been a lot of work with Senator Whitley and others on this specific issue in New Hampshire. So I am today, by the way, for the record, I'm Senator Tom Sherman from District 24 on the Seacoast. Today I'm introducing SB 453 and asking you not to pay a lot of attention to the bill as introduced, but to the amendment that replaces it. It's a replace all. The bill as introduced really kind of missed the mark of what I was trying to do, and the amendment is much closer. And the amendment came about after having had discussions with early childhood experts around the state. This replace all amendment seeks to serve as enabling legislation that would allow a municipality to start a pre-K program or use an existing pre-K program to provide services with the availability of financial assistance. Similar public-private partnerships have proven to be very successful in other states, really interesting to me is that one of the first states to try this was Oklahoma, which, not getting too political on this, it's a very strong Republican state, very conservative state, and it's been hugely successful and was launched by a group of Republican legislators who really felt this would be transformative for their state. But they kept it public-private, which was an important part of that. Since then, New Jersey, Wisconsin, and other states have really jumped on the bandwagon, but they've also shown that it takes several years from inception before they are able to provide the services fully as intended. And in Oklahoma, they really felt like they were getting where they wanted to be 10 years after they started their program. Another goal of the bill is to provide a mechanism for acceptance of outside funding, including federal grants, to develop and sustain the programs. No state funding is required, and this is enabling legislation, and therefore does not require any additional funding from the municipality unless they so choose. As I said earlier, there's broad research evidence that early childhood and pre-K programs are much more likely to launch a child on a successful trajectory in life. As our experience with kindergarten in New Hampshire has shown, New Hampshire clearly benefits from this early childhood programming. I'd like to also address two specific parts of this that are a little different, and this is why the amendment is in there. One is that this is overseen not by the Department of Education, but by Department of Health and Human Services. And the reason for that is that there are already existing programs that incorporate early childhood and pre-K, and they are, the early childhood component is already licensed by DHHS. So trying to figure out exactly where that demarcation comes between DHHS responsibility and DOE responsibility, really to me, I felt the most appropriate would be, since these programs are often hybrid programs, that we go with the licensing body. And some of this would be solved if Senator Whitley's bill, the Office of Early Childhood, starts to occur. That might be a really ideal place for this. But for right now, looking at the licensing bodies, the people with expertise on this age group, that's why I put it under DHHS. And I think I will stop there. I hope the Education Committee will join me in supporting the bill, which I believe represents the future of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this forward, and in this amended form. So the vision for this is that should federal funding become available, that the state has some guidance as to how existing preschools, whether they're in public or private ownership, would access these funds?
Yes. So in reviewing, I looked at several different states' existing laws and statutes. Probably the most advanced at this point, and the most current, is New Jersey. But when you look at federal laws or proposed federal statute, some of it is really specific on what's needed to be able to meet the grant that would be coming from the federal government. And so there were two things that I tried to do in this. One was to be sure that we had that guidance, and if you look on the amendment, page 2, lines 10 through 27, you'll see the standards. Those are all the points. We're not telling them what to do. We're leaving it mostly up to rulemaking. But it's giving the outline that the federal grants would likely have. What are going to be the minimum standards that are required so that we can actually pick up those federal grants. But right now, as far as I know, we have no mechanism for accepting federal grants for pre-K. And this would allow a mechanism for being able to accept that funding at a state level and then being able to distribute it in the form of, essentially in the form of assistance for tuition.
Yeah, if I can continue, Madam Chair? Thank you. There is no mandate with this program.
None.
This would be entirely voluntary, both for a private school to
Private or
aim
public?
to serve eligible students and to make their program eligible, as well as a public local school district to expand
Correct.
their program to 3- and 4-year-old kids.
Yeah, so this is trying to avoid some of the problems that New Jersey ran into, which is when a school district sort of goes ahead and creates a program that actually competes with an excellent existing program. So this would allow the town to really be in charge, the municipality to be in charge of whether they do it, how they do it. But if you have a great program, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You just want to make it possible for that program to accept outside funding to support children who might not have the opportunity otherwise.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Prentice, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Senator Ward, thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Sherman? I have one, at least. So what is the cost for this program? I mean, how many kids do you think can you envision signing up for this pre-K?
I think it would depend on the municipality, the size of the municipality, whether they already have a program. The cost is completely up to the municipality in terms of how much they want to participate. But, in the ideal world, you would have a federal grant coming in, DHHS holding that federal grant and being able to disperse those funds with each, for each child as requested. So the municipality asks for the funds, they have a child in the program, and then the child meets the federal poverty limit guidelines, and then they would be able to actually then ask for, either provide that assistance as a municipality, which is completely up to them, or if the state had received grant money, then they could request that grant money. And the way it's phrased in the amendment is that if the state has X amount of dollars and Y number of children, the goal would be to say, we're going to fund all of them. But if they don't have enough money to fund all of them, they fund them as best they can, and it uses the word apportionment. So it's not dipping into general funds. It's not going into the education trust fund. It's not going into anything else. It's just that fund that would be created by this amendment, which right now has 0 in it.
How do you see the staffing? What kind of education do you see these people have?
That would be up to rulemaking. Nationally, there may be people here who can speak to that more specifically than I can. I mean, in many of the pre-K programs in the state, there are master's levels, bachelor's levels, associate levels. I remember when my son was in the program in Exeter, there were at least 2 master's level people doing the pre-K program, running it and administering it, and everyone else had some form of a degree or certification. I think that'd be ideal. But remember, some of these programs already exist, and some of them are excellent. But this would, and they are the ones that are a hybrid and have the early childhood. You know, this is something that DHHS already licenses.
Thank you. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sherman. I have two questions. One is the fiscal note that was revised 2722, does not relate to the amendment?
No,
Okay. Will we be getting a new fiscal note?
I can request one.
Okay, thank you. And then could you walk us through page 4? It seems like this bill does something different as well.
No, page 4 is very confusing, and I apologize for that, but OLS used existing statute that was, I think the word they used was dormant. And so page 4, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Page 4 made no sense to me, and when I talked to OLS, what they said was they used existing statute, you know, parts of the statute, and this allowed them to do it. So this is everything they needed to do to make that part of the statute no longer functional.
Follow up.
So this bill is not looking to change anything to do with adoption assistance?
No.
Okay.
Right.
Thank
It's, as I said, I apologize for that. I can get a formal explanation from OLS, if that'd be helpful, of exactly why they did what they had to do. I think that would be helpful, so let me do that.
Thank you.
So a fiscal note and an explanation from OLS. It was far above my pay grade.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jackie Cowell.
Good morning. How do you do? I'm Jackie Cowell from Newbury, New Hampshire, and I am the Executive Director of Early Learning New Hampshire. We are a private statewide nonprofit with a mission to ensure every child has the opportunity to grow to their full potential. And we do that, part of it, with working with child care programs, Head Start programs, pre-K programs, et cetera, early childhood education. And so I'm here to testify in support of the amendment in SB 453 and saying that we are grateful that Senator Sherman, the prime sponsor, did reach out to the early childhood community and find out what are some of the perhaps unintended consequences of running a pre-K program, what has happened in other states. He's done his own research, et cetera. And actually, I was in a Zoom call yesterday up in the Upper Valley. Sean Mulholland,
City manager.
right? It was a really terrific conversation with Vital Communities and some other folks that talked about childcare and how to help childcare. And a woman from Vermont mentioned that there were some unintended consequences when they rolled out their pre-K program. And part of it is that if you take some of the 3- and 4-year-olds away from childcare programs or Head Start programs, it's really difficult, and it can actually hurt the existing infrastructure of childcare. So in other words, what happens is infants and toddlers are a really important part of childcare and early childhood development, early childhood education, but you take the 3s and 4s out, and what that actually does is it's very unaffordable as a business model to do just infants and toddlers. It's sort of, someone told me once, it's like having a hospital run only with an ICU unit. You know, that really intense work, and you need other things. So we're very grateful that this bill is looking at the ways that have been successful, as Senator Sherman testified, where the pre-K dollars could be within a child care program. Pre-K dollars could be within a Head Start. The folks could be blended. It could be in a public school, of course. So just really thinking thoughtfully about where the best place is to do pre-K. And I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Khan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. On page 2, we've got the minimum standards for approving a preschool program. Are those already what guides DHHS authorization to operate as a preschool?
That might be about outside of my expertise, Senator Khan.
I just recognize that beyond your table there, I don't see anybody from HHS
Yeah.
here.
I can answer the question that was asked before about the qualifications of what for running these programs. What other states do, and I think New Hampshire would likely do, is that in order to get the pre-K specific funding coming to, let's say, a child care program, the teachers would have to follow the same minimum qualifications of a public pre-K teacher. And so there usually are some supports to try to help them get those degrees, get the advanced education. But it's typically a bachelor's degree to begin with. Yeah.
In early childhood education.
Yes. Yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, isn't it, if I could,
Follow up.
isn't it such that there are different staffing ratios? A certain, need a bachelor's degree for X number of students, a smaller
Right.
number of students can be served by an associate degree student, another smaller number can be served by a certificated student.
Yeah. So
I
it's
mean, and
mainly.
all of that is in section 170, which is why I'm a little confused about the reference of.
So there's not different qualifications for the
where this comes
age
from.
or the ratios. It's in terms of whether they're a child care program or a Head Start program or a pre-K program. So in other words, there are associate degree head teacher in child care and bachelor's in Head Start mainly and also in public pre-K, but not based on the age because they're different ages. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could somebody from DOE talk about the oversight by HHS versus the DOE? Anybody? Ms. Fenton?
Good morning. For the record, my name is Diana Fenton. I'm an attorney with the Department of Education. I'm not sure how much information I can provide on this particular bill.
Okay.
In terms of the oversight and the working together with DHHS, it's not unheard of, it's not unusual. There are a lot of programs with a lot of oversight. I would direct this committee to another bill, as a Senate bill, that the number is escaping me, but it is for the Office of Early Childhood Development, and the idea that that department could be housed within DOE, and that is currently being developed, and it's very early in the stages, so I don't want to mislead this committee in any way, but it might be worth looking at that bill in conjunction with this bill that is currently before you.
Is that the bill that Senator Sherman was mentioned by Whitley?
I don't want to speak for him, but I think, yes.
Okay, we'll take a look at it. Senator Hennessy,
Is it SB 326? Yeah, thank you.
346?
326, yes.
Can you tell me what committee that's in?
Health and Human Services.
But it's setting up the department in the Department of Education?
So it was heard, it was heard back in early January, maybe January 12th. I believe it was in Health and Human Services. I can get you that information. And it's to establish a study committee to look at the development of that.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you. Anybody else who has anything to add to this particular bill? Yes.
Good morning, Mark Manganello, Office of School Finance, Department of Education. I'm just here if you have any questions relative to adequacy sections of the bill, and I appreciate Attorney Fenton talking about the accountability aspect of it. I know the way Senate Bill 453 is introduced would involve some rulemaking as far as it bringing in minimum standards. So there would be some work involved. On the Bureau of Accountability would have to do some work. But I can take questions relative to the adequacy aspects of the bill.
I guess that would be how much money?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Khan.
if I could, I think that, have you seen the amendment?
I'm not.
That's the confusion then, so I think they've stripped out all the adequacy sections
Yep.
here.
So, yeah, if there's no questions about the bill as introduced, then. I haven't seen the amendment, I just heard
Yeah, no,
some
we're
testimony.
discussing the amendment because it replaces the whole bill.
Yes.
So. Do you want to take a few minutes to read it and
Um,
get back to us, or?
Yeah, probably, looks like there's a lot going on here, so it might take more, I know Senator explained it, but yeah, I don't know if, how much, if you have questions that you wanted me to get back to you with, probably, as far as the fiscal note process, amendment needs to be, in order for the LBA to do a fiscal note, it does need to pass the full chamber, so there wouldn't naturally get a fiscal note attached to an amendment on a bill as introduced. The amendment, the fiscal note for the bill as introduced, I was talking with Mickey, that's going to be published soon. I think it's in the Senate Clerk's office. So you will see a fiscal note for the bill as introduced, but as far as the LBA process for an amendment, I believe it has to go through the full Senate floor for the LBA to complete that process.
Yeah, I think we have the fiscal note for the bill that was introduced.
Okay.
We have that. Senator Hennessy?
So if the department could do a preliminary analysis that you would normally do for a fiscal note on the amendment, that would be wonderful. And sorry for the duplicate effort.
We could take a peek at it.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much. Oh, you want it, Senator Sherman? That's you. Yeah, you wanted to respond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Khan pointed out I was looking through this quickly under minimum standards. What I'd like to do is offer two things. One is an amendment to the amendment that I can have drafted that would add qualifications for the staff. It does have a number of individuals, and in Section B, it does do this, but I think there was a concern that we might need to be a little more specific about what the qualifications need to meet so that we'd be able to meet the public school standards for any children, any teachers working in pre-K. And I can work with Jackie to see if that is needed, if we need to make a little change in Section B, so that it would be clear that the rules need to match what would make it eligible for federal funding, if that were possible. The other point I'd like to make is this has no involvement of the Department of Education in this amendment. So I'd be happy to talk to John Williams and see if we can see about getting a fiscal note based on the amendment from the department, or at least a comment for Senator Hennessy on the cost of this for the Department of Health and Human Services, if that would be helpful.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any other comments?
Senator Sherman? Sorry. So I think for us, before we can move further with this, personally, would be, we would need to know the cost to the local community as well. So Health and Human Services might have that detail for you on who would qualify for the free aspect that the local property taxes would have to pick up.
That would be only, if I may respond, your question is only, since this is enabling, the cost would be zero unless they wanted to do it. So it would be if they opt to do it. So no property tax impact unless they want to put local money towards this. So the question is, what would be the estimated cost if they were actually to go forward with it?
Yeah, and just a follow-up question too. I know you and I spoke about this, that some communities already have a pre-K option.
Right.
Would this funding automatically apply to them?
They would have to go through the process, but they would already be almost there. So they would have to meet the eligibility based on the criteria in this amendment, and then they could apply for if there's any state funding available, they could then do that. My worry, if I could just expand a little bit, my worry is that we might have federal money available to do this and not have any mechanism to accept that federal money. And that's part of the goal that I'm trying to accomplish, is to make sure we have a vehicle that would be consistent with what's envisioned in what has been made available so far for what the structure might look like. But I don't know anywhere in our system where we have any ability or any place for pre-K funding to come in. So in a sense, this would be that vehicle to accept that would meet federal standards.
Thank you.
But I will go ahead and talk to, I think Senator Hennessy, if it's all right with you, I'll also talk to the Municipal Association. Okay?
I don't see any other comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments from the audience? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on SB, whatever, 453. Thank you for coming. Now, we have the next one, which is
And I have an amendment
Senate
for
Bill.
your committee to consider.
I think we have it. Is that different from what we had
We'll talk
earlier?
about the amendment after I finish talking about the bill.
What's the number? 410. I know, but 534. Yeah, we have it. I have it.
I wasn't sure, but I brought them just so you would have them.
Thank you. Senator Carson is going to introduce Senate Bill 410.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to the members of the Senate Education Committee. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson, and I have the pleasure of representing Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Londonderry, Hudson, and Auburn. And I have for your consideration this morning Senate Bill 410. This bill requires public comment periods at school board meetings, the adoption of a school board code of ethics developed by the State Board of Education, and procedures for amendment and submission of school district charters. Madam Chair, this bill came out, quite frankly, of me observing what was going on across the state this summertime and in through the fall. And the fact that so many school board meetings were contentious between parents and school board members. I was very observant. I actually spoke at one, but it had nothing to do with what they were talking about, that particular meeting. It was more about what was the role of the school board. But in talking with school board members, not only in my district, but across the state, as well as parents in my district and across the state, they identified a number of areas where they felt that there needed to be some improvement, and this bill is a result of this. And I would like to just walk you through this. The first section, beginning on page 1, line 5, it states that every public meeting held by a school board shall include a period for public comment, which shall be publicly noticed and shall comply with the requirements of RSA 91A. The period shall be a minimum of 30 minutes in length and shall be held at the beginning of the meeting as the first order of business after the meeting is called to order. What I saw and what I heard was that oftentimes they would have the public comment section at the end. And oftentimes, some of these meetings ran after 10 o'clock. Parents have to go to work the next day. They've got children at home. They felt that this was a way to stop them from speaking at the school board meetings. So that's why I've moved this to the front of the meeting. The second part about allowing at least a half an hour, in many districts across the state, they do not allow the people to speak, to address their school boards. If they do, some of them put in an artificial constraint saying you have to sign up 2, 3, 4, 5 days ahead of time, and you have to submit the questions for us. That shouldn't be. A parent should be able to go into any school board meeting and ask a school board, their elected school board members, a question. Or talk about anything they want to talk with their school board about without having qualifications put into place. Again, the second section beginning on line 9 says that they shall not require people who want to speak to register or sign in more than 2 hours in advance of the meeting. So that way, a parent, again, who wants to talk to their school board has an opportunity to do so. And then it says that they may give preference in speaking to parents of children in the district and other persons who live in the district. The second, and again, the third section says they may impose reasonable but equal time limits on each speaker. I think we all know about that. We know sometimes we have public meetings that there are a lot of members of the public, and sometimes we will say to people, you have 3 minutes, and it's in the interest of allowing everyone who came out the opportunity to speak to whoever they're going to be speaking in front of, and that's what this section is modeled after. The second section deals with a school board code of ethics. I was surprised to find out that many school districts across the state they just do not have a code of ethics that governs them and their behavior. And so what I did in this section was I left it up to the state school board to adopt a model code of ethics, and that it shall include methods of reporting violations of such code and appropriate consequences, and they can adopt revisions. What I envision with this section is the school board adopting the model. The local districts have to adopt that, but they can go beyond that if they choose to. They can add to it. It's not definite that this is it. You can't go beyond that. We want to give the school boards some flexibility, because each district is very different. And what might be of a concern to my district might not be a concern to Senator Prentice's district. So you've got to allow for some flexibility. It also says that any discussion, deliberation, or votes concerning the adoption shall be open to the public and shall accept public comments. And then the fourth section says that that the code of ethics adopted by the local school board shall be posted on the school board website, any individual public website, and shall be made available upon request by any member of the public. The last, what was the last section, deals with school district charters. One thing I found out, and it was revealed in the town of Londonderry, that the school district charter hadn't really been changed since the late 1980s. I believe testimony was given at one public hearing since 1989. That's a long time. That's a very, very long time. And so it says if they have a governing charter, that it has to be approved by the voters of the district every 5 years. So that way it stays current. You have involvement from the community, and the community has the opportunity to vote on that charter. And there is an amendment process in here that it may be proposed by a member of the public or a school board member. And if the school board, as the governing body, approves by a majority vote the proposed amendment according to the procedures in RSA 49B, shall then be placed on the ballot for the voters' approval at the next school meeting or the election according to this chapter. So now the parents and the people of the district are going to have an opportunity to have a vote on adopting amendments to school charters. The final section, Madam Chair, is the amendment, which is number 0534S. And this is a result of having a conversation with a school board member and a parent. And it seems that a school district was sued in the state because a school board member tried to get information, paperwork about what was going on within that district, and they couldn't get it. They were not allowed to have it. How can a school board member do its job if they can't get the paperwork that they need from a school district? And this says here that they have a right to review the records, provided the elected school board member shall not disclose, and I think we want to be very, very upfront about this. They cannot use any kind of student personally identifiable data, teacher personally identified data, unique pupil identifiers, and confident and privileged information. So that is to ensure that a school board member can do their job. And at this point, Madam Chair, I would be more than happy to try to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you
Yeah,
very
Madam
much.
Chair.
Oh, no,
Senator Khan.
Just trying to, you know I'm a little,
I know,
Slow
that's
on the
why I
uptake
was
there.
looking at you, Senator Khan, because I know always, we're on judiciary together, and
it is an opportunity to ask it, you know.
Sure, I
and
would
if-
be more than
and if
happy
you
to
step
answer your
away
question.
and I don't catch you, I'm gonna miss that opportunity until I see you on Thursday. But I'm wondering if there was any consultation, like with the State Board of Education on this.
I had spoken to the commissioner, yes. And I believe I spoke to him back in September.
So the ideas of a code of ethics, the Board of Education, we don't have any rules like that currently.
No, it's my understanding they do not. They do not create a code of ethics for school districts. Usually, if a school district has one, they've created it on their own. So if this bill should pass and get signed into law, there will be a uniform policy across the state concerning all school districts. But again, there is flexibility, so if a school district wants to go beyond that code of ethics that reflects their community, they can do that. It's not an issue.
And if I might continue, Madam Chair?
Follow up.
The idea around the school district charter, most school, I mean, I think that comes out of the idea that if there's a city charter, cities might have a charter for their schools. I guess I'm not familiar that these exist very frequently.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I don't know how many school districts have charters, but this would only affect those who do have charters. It doesn't affect, if you don't have a charter, it doesn't affect you.
And the last question, Madam Chair, in the public comment section, it was, you did it well to describe, these are two really independent thoughts in here. They don't necessarily need to be linked. The thought about signing up for a public comment and the thought of when it occurs are independent. And I'm asking that because the sign-up might be one issue to be addressed. The when public comment is received, we've gotten some emails and that question, there's some advantage to putting it at the front of the meeting. I can imagine a parent with kids sitting next to them getting itchy and, I got this one thing I got to say to you and wanting to get it done in that. On the other hand, there are items on the agenda that it might be valuable for the public to hear to the discussion and then offer public comment after the presentation of a topic. It's much like a warrant article or a budget topic. You'd want to hear the presentation, and then you'd open it up for public comment on the budget and in a deliberative session. So these two act independently, and whether a decision could be made on one, and it doesn't dictate that the second one has to occur as well.
Well, thank you, Senator. One of the reasons.
And my point is that in this piece, if paragraph 1 was separated out of this bill because of the 30 minutes in advance of the meeting, what would stand would still be the second paragraph, which would still offer some improvement to what you see as a problem with public comment.
I think anything at this point would be an improvement, Senator. I do think it is important that we make the statement that the public has the right to address their local school board. And oftentimes, people will say, well, it's not a public meeting. We're meeting in public, but it's not a public meeting. And that's not true. And that particular section recognizes the fact that they're elected officials. They represent the people. Their job is to listen to the people when the people come forward. You can do it at the beginning of the meeting. Yes, it's convenient for parents who've got small children, who've got to get home, or parents who work and have got to get home because they've got to get up the next morning early to go to work. But there are school boards in the state that will have a public comment section in the beginning, and then they'll have another one at the end of the meeting and give people the opportunity. And I think that's great, but I'm not going to make that decision and force them to do two. I don't think that that would be appropriate. They need to make that decision if they want to have a separate section afterwards. But I do think at least having 30 minutes prior to the meeting is appropriate. You need to have a chance to listen to what parents have to say. Parents are their children's biggest advocates, and they have the right to address their local government for whatever reason. And unfortunately, what's happened, and we've seen it not only here in New Hampshire, but across the country, where parents are being labeled domestic terrorists because they're going to these school board meetings and they're angry because they're not allowed to speak. And their concerns are being ignored. This is an opportunity to give parents that chance to address their local school board. That's all. That's all it is. It's us, the state, recognizing the importance of parents being involved with their children's education, being their advocate, and having a conversation with their elected officials about what's going on in their school district. And I think we should be saying that's a great idea. We want to facilitate that. We want to ensure that that happens. We've seen a lot of parental involvement because of COVID and what's happened with the state of education. Our kids, their scores have gone way, way down. And this is not the fault of the teachers, not at all. It's the fault of the school boards and the administrators that have adopted policies. And the parents want to be able to comment on those policies. And in many districts, they're not given the opportunity to do that. And this is an attempt to give them that chance to be able to address their local school board.
Thank you.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator Carson, for being here today. Just like Senator Khan, I did receive some feedback on the 30 minutes being at the beginning of the period. And I think the reasoning just a little bit different. So there's not much clarification as to what needs to go onto an agenda for a meeting. So if a parent were to read it and something were to say other business or something pretty vague about something, if 30 minutes is at the beginning of the meeting before any discussion or action has been taken, they wouldn't know what to comment on necessarily all the time. So I'm wondering if you're open to an amendment, and I don't have the exact words, but prior to any action taken by the board would be an appropriate time for public comment. And that may not include approval of prior minutes or something like that, but just so that parents or constituents that come to a meeting actually can comment on what is being done at the meeting versus trying to guess what a particular agenda item might mean.
Well, thank you for the question. I will leave that up to the experts that are sitting on Senate Education. You're going to hear all the testimony. You're going to be the ones debating whether or not this is a good idea or not. And if you choose to amend this, I'm okay with that. The only thing that I really care about is the parents having an opportunity to address their school board. Whether it's at the beginning, in the middle, they need to have that opportunity. I would hope that you wouldn't put it at the end, because I think that that's being used as a way to cut down on the number of people being able to speak. But if you can come up with something better, I'm definitely open to that.
Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Chair Ward, and Senator Carson, thank you. It's not so much a question, just a statement. I'm going to tag on to what Senator Hennessy has brought forward. I think, and this is getting into the weeds, the public comment period, or the discussion with the elected officials at a public meeting in the schools, or at a school board meeting, is essential, from the families. I completely agree with you. But lining up where it needs to be is what's I think the real issue. It should be part of and this is a weedy kind of thing, but it should be part, in order to get, like, if everybody got up and spoke in the beginning about their concerns and then stopped and the agenda went forward, I'm worried about taking these concerns or public comments and fitting them into the right places for consideration by the elected officials. So my suggestion is, if there's going to be an open comment period at the beginning of the meeting, it should be for anything that's not on the agenda. If parents just want to have a comment that they want to make, but where they address specific issues, is that the school board should have a period of time as part of that agenda item for the comment, so that the parents, or anyone who's coming to talk can bring it up at that point. So it's more like compact and in context. I'm afraid that here to where it may end up in here, it could lose something in translation. So I support what you're bringing forward. I just think how it gets organized, we could help a little bit with that.
Well, thank you for the comment. There are school board members that are here,
Great.
that former and current, that could probably add to that discussion.
Okay, thanks, Senator Carson.
You're welcome.
Senator DeShardy?
Thank you, Senator Carson, for bringing this bill forward. We could work on this in some areas, but I do want to bring up the fact that I was contacted by several constituents in my district that they were very passionate about asking questions, and it was late, and so the school board said, well, cutoff time. So I understand what you're saying. Maybe you have to let the people speak. I mean, you can't just say, it's late and we're going to stop. And that's my concern by having it at the end as well. So I do think this, we need to take that into consideration. And I'm basing that on constituents.
Thank you for your question. As my colleague, Senator Khan, knows, we serve on judiciary together, and we're here sometimes 5, 6 o'clock at night, because everyone that comes to the committee who wants to testify in a bill, I make sure that they have an opportunity to testify, and it doesn't matter how long we are here. There are times when the Judiciary Committee, we've been there after 7 o'clock at night. So this is something that's very important to me, because if someone is going to take the time out of their day to come and testify in front of us, the legislature, we have a duty and responsibility to listen to what they have to say. That's important. And that is their right. That is their right. And I was really surprised to see that that is not necessarily what's happening with some local governments. And I think that's what's fueled a lot of the dissension between parents and school boards, not only here in New Hampshire, but across the country. Parents want to be heard. They're passionate. They want what's best for their children. And school boards are either not allowing them to speak, or they've become very argumentative with parents. Some feel threatened by parents who come in to question, why are you doing what you're doing? We don't feel that kind of threat. In fact, I expect people to be here to question us, to ask us why. Why are you doing this? Why is this being done this way? We just have to do this better. And I thought this was a good place to start.
Any other comments? Seeing none, thank you, Senator
Thank you very
Carson.
much, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee.
Barrett's Christina has taken some time out of his morning to be here. And we will listen to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. We're opposed to Senate Bill 410. This has been my life for the last year, I'd say, public comments at school board meetings. So I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. I will try and spare the committee some time. I want to thank Senator Carson for the bill, even though we do disagree with it and we do oppose the bill. To be clear, just because NHSBA opposes the bill does not mean that we oppose public comments at school board meetings. NHSBA tells all of our school boards that you should be providing some avenue for members of the public to come and address the school board, whether or not that's at the beginning of the meeting, whether or not that's after each agenda item, whether or not that's at the end of the meeting. You should have a policy that carves out time, place, scope of a public comment period. My understanding that most school boards do this. There are some across the state that probably do not offer a public comment period. In NHSBA's opinion, that is unadvisable, that is ill-advised. But that is a local issue. This is a state bill trying to solve what seem to be local issues with local communities and local school districts. So that's one opposition that NHSBA has. We did do a survey. There was a similar bill in House Judiciary that's working through the process. So we did a survey of SAU offices asking if their boards had a public comment period. Did you offer more than one public comment period? Any sort of restrictions or scope or parameters around what the public comment period may be? We did not hear back from every SAU, obviously. I want to guess we heard back from maybe half. Does your school board offer more than one public comment meeting? Yes. Yes, we offer 2 public comment periods. We have 2 for one board, 1 before new business and 1 at the end of the meeting. No, just 1. Depending on the agenda items, the board chair may allow public comment again during the meeting. We restrict comments to 3 minutes. We currently do not restrict public comment, but we're working on doing a policy to do so. We offer public comment period at the end of every meeting. The board offers public comment period twice during the meeting. So school boards are already doing this across the state. To the extent that there are some that may not, again, that's a local issue that should be determined locally. There are some other logistical problems with requiring that a school board offer a public comment period as the first order of business right after the meeting is called to order. For example, there's provisions in the right to know law that allow for emergency meetings. The roof caves in or there's a chemical spill at the building, so the emergency provisions under the right to know law relax the quorum and notice requirements. You still have to provide notice as soon as possible, but who's ever available can get to the school to figure that out. So the roof caves in because there's a ice storm in February in New Hampshire, which happens from time to time. We're calling an emergency meeting to figure out what we're going to do with schooling. We have to hold a 30-minute public comment period before that. That doesn't seem to make any sense. Additionally, there are also times when a school board is meeting for the sole purpose of going into non-public session. You're not having a public portion of the meeting. Something happened, a teacher's under investigation, allegations of this, allegations of that. So the board gathers and they're only meeting in non-public session, perhaps with the attorney, perhaps with the superintendent or the principal to discuss whatever issue it may be. Maybe the chief of police has to come in because something happened at the school that day. We'd have to be holding a 30-minute public comment period for a purpose when the board needs to get the business done to that relative to that non-public session. The other questions that we would have is that the 30-minute the 30-minute period, at least 30 minutes for the public comment period. The law doesn't say the bill does not say what happens if there aren't 30 minutes of public comment. If one person shows up and speaks for their 3 or 4 minutes, does the school board have to sit there for another 25 minutes? Or can it get into its business of the agenda? What happens if somebody shows up, the meeting starts at 6 o'clock, they think they have 30 minutes for public comment, but nobody showed up at 6 o'clock, so there was no public comment. Somebody shows up at 6:20, are we stopping the meeting, the discussion that the board's in, to allow that person to have their 3 minutes? The bill is not clear about that. I would also like to say the bill relative to the ethics provisions that's in the bill, which I'll get to in a minute, putting sort of this rulemaking authority relative to a code of conduct for the State Board of Education. I think it's important for this body to know that the State Board of Education has not taken public comments in about a year, if not longer. Parents have shown up to state board meetings expecting to have a public comment period and raise issues with our state leaders at the Department of Education, and they've been shut down. So let's just keep that in mind as well, too, if we're going to mandate this for local school boards. Parents have sought avenues of redress at the state board meetings, and they've been told they can't speak. So it's not just local school boards. Senator Khan, you brought up the issue about there may be important business for the school board to address before you get into the public comment period. Many of our school boards will do student presentations right at the call of the meeting. So you may have a classroom of second or third graders there to give some sort of presentation or a report. They're going to have to sit around for a half hour while we do this public comment period before we can do their presentation. And I'll be honest with you, a 30-minute public comment period is going to turn into probably 45 minutes by the time people get up to the podium, sit down, this, that, and the other thing. So those are some of the other logistical problems with the bill that NHSBA would oppose. Just going through some of my notes here. I think that's sort of it as far as it goes to the public comment period. Relative to the provision in the bill that speaks to the State Board of Education developing a code of ethics, there was a bill, I want to say 2, maybe 3 sessions ago that started out in House Education that essentially called for the same thing. It put sort of rulemaking authority in the hands of the State Board of Education to create a code of ethics for local school boards. Representative Bohm, who was on House Education, who was a former school board member in the Litchfield School District, in his opposition to the bill, I think said it best. He said, "My ethics are between me and my constituents. If they don't like the job that I'm doing, they will vote for somebody else." NHSBA would agree with some of those sentiments. The other problem with putting sort of code of ethics into law, if you will, ethics are nebulous. Ethics vary person to person. It's not conduct, it's ethics. They relate to morals, not action. One person's unethical behavior is another person's ethical behavior, and vice versa. So how we're going to codify that into rules would be challenging. NHSBA would also have strong objection to unelected people appointed to a public body dictating how elected public officials should be behaving. Again, we think that how a particular elected official is behaving or acting is an issue between that individual and his or her constituents. Certainly not unelected appointed people. There are some provisions in law that call for the removal of elected officers. RSA 42:1-A speaks to if a local official, a select board, school board member, violates confidentiality or privacy requirements, there's a removal process. And NHSBA does have a sample ethics policy. I don't know if I have it on me, but I did give it to Ms. Hawks earlier today. I believe she'd passed it around. So that's a recommended policy, but it's aspirational. If somebody does something contrary to that policy, it's not like they're going to be removed from office or go to jail or face some sort of sanctions. I will also tell you that That sample policy that NHSBA has in place has, from time to time, caused consternation among some school board members. We've certainly heard, who do you think you are telling me what's ethical and what's not ethical? That's between me and my voters, this, that, and the other thing. And then I get a call from another school board member, such and such a board member is violating this policy on a code, on, our ethical policy. I say, that's an election issue. It's nothing we can do. We put this out as sort of aspirational best practices, things we hope school board members would do in response to good governance, if you will. So one last point I will mention, not related to my testimony, we did have a school board member, Attorney Bernard Campbell from Salem, New Hampshire, on the Salem School Board for, I think, 25 years, forwarded me a letter early this morning. I did print it off. I did give it to Ms. Hawks, and she did pass it around for you as well, too. I just wanted to make sure that you got that, and in case Attorney Campbell is listening, and he knows that I got that to everybody. So I think I have, lots more comments. I could go on about this for hours, if you will. So I thank the committee for indulging me. NHSBA is opposed to the bill for the reasons that I stated, and probably a handful more that I did not state, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Christina. Any questions, comments from the committee members? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Christina. The question about a charter, school charters, it's just a foreign concept to me. I understand municipal charters. I understand school charters might be a subsection, paragraph within a city charter, but I'm not familiar with schools having charters.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Senator. I believe it's RSA 49-D, I think,
Right.
is that, I don't know if I have the copy of the bill in front of me. To my knowledge, there are at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 school districts where the community has voted on a charter on how that school district will be formed, created, the budget is developed. I believe Londonderry, Senator Carson's district, I believe they operate under a charter. I believe Kearsarge Regional School District operates under a charter as well. And there may be 1 or 2 more that I'm mistaken right now. It's essentially, you can put it on the warrant and the voters vote of whether or not this is how they want their sort of governance structure to be, if you will.
All set? Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Mrs.
Madam Chair.
Christina. Steve Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also thank you to all the senators on the committee. I appreciate you listening to me. I'm going to give a brief history because the things that I'm going to discuss relate to that
Would you
history.
state your name and the
Certainly.
town?
Steve Young of Londonderry, New Hampshire.
Thank you.
It's like I
Go ahead.
always lived there, so everybody knows that.
Okay.
I've been in public service for the community for a number of years, 21 years of that as an elected position. It was a long enough time that we had a very similar clock, and I changed the batteries on that clock 3 times over those 21 years because I got tired of looking at the clock that was wrong. My elected position began as a budget committee member in 1989. And I'll keep it brief, but an explanation of SB2. Our town is SB2 for us. It was going to be SB2 for the school district, but we did a charter, and our charter was SB2-like. As a matter of fact, it was almost exactly the same. It's changed slightly over the years, but that's why we are a charter. The town didn't want to be told by the people here in Concord what to do. We wanted to decide what we were going to do. I served for the Budget Committee for 3 years. I was chair for one of those years. During that tenure, I was appointed to the Manchester Airport Authority and served there for 15 years over a different number of terms because they have time limits on how long you can serve. And there's a reason I bring that up, and I'll explain that as it relates to Senator Carson's bill. And then I was on the school board, the Londonderry School Board, up until March of last year, and I served there for 18 years. Some of the things I'm going to say may sound like they're not necessarily student, school, parent friendly, but do understand I am extremely, extremely supportive of the schools, of the district offices, of the teachers, of the facilities, of the parents, of the voters, and the citizens in the community. I was the president of NH Cafe. That's the New Hampshire Community for Adequate Funding of an Education, who, with Nate Greenberg, it was the Londonderry Merrimack lawsuit for adequate funding. The third lawsuit, I think, that we went to court on since the Claremont, original Claremont decision. And that's where we went to the Supreme Court of New Hampshire, and the court held you and the entire government here responsible to determine what an adequate education was, to fund an adequate education, to distribute those funds, and to hold themselves accountable. That last one got a little mixed up. I think that the government here decided it wasn't to hold themselves, this court, responsible, but it was to hold the school districts responsible. So in that process, that was for the children, or in the entire state of New Hampshire. It was for every community in New Hampshire. The organization had 23 town and school district members that I worked with, and it worked out very well. Not much has changed since we won that case. We still get about the same amount of money, but at least it's defined, and we know what we're going to get in the school districts, or they know what they're going to get, because I'm no longer on the board. As it relates to the public comment, on the budget committee, we never really had anybody come to the meeting anyways. But when I was on the committee, we were more than happy to listen to people that would walk into the room at any time that they wanted to speak. And then on the, as chairman of that committee, I would have been happy to allow anybody to speak as you're letting us speak here. Then I began on the school district. The school district the Londonderry School District has no public comment section on its agenda, ever. Now, it may this year, but in the 18 years I was there, it did not have a public comment section on it. I was chairman of that board probably 5 different years over the years. And we had a presentation and comment section. Now, the presentation and comment section between board members, there was a little bit of a nudge, you know. If we called it that, then when people came in, they didn't clearly see there was a public comment section. It was presentations and announcements. So that must be for the school people. That must be for the people in the meeting. And that really did cut down on quite a few people being able to come into the meeting and speak. It works well. I wouldn't be surprised if that's occurring in other school districts in the state. Now, as chair, I would always call on the public for comment during that section. As a matter of fact, if people were interested during the meeting on a particular subject that we were talking about, I would always call on them so that they could speak. When I was chairman, I had that capability. You see, not everybody feels that way. If there's no defined time on the agenda, then when do you speak? When do you feel comfortable to speak? Or are they allowed to speak? I brought up the airport authority. I joined the airport authority in 1991, and it was just after the airplanes came in with what are called hush kits. The airplanes were really loud. And if you don't know, the Londonderry, the airport, is actually in Londonderry, not Manchester. That board's made up of 2 Londonderry members and 5 Manchester members, and we're appointed on the Londonderry side by the town side, and we're also appointed by the Manchester government to be on that board. And right at the top of the agenda, since 1991 when I started, it was public comment, 15 minutes. Well, after 3 or 4 meetings, I asked some of the other members of the board, I said, we have this public comment, but nobody ever says anything. And why is it limited? And the explanation is because everybody used to come in and spend the entire meeting complaining about how loud the airplanes were and slamming their fist on the table saying, what are we going to do about it? So that was added to the agenda. And it remains there to this day. I think I had 2 people in those 15 years that actually came up during that 15-minute public comment. One of them was a real estate agent that worked for the airfield, and I don't remember the other one. But unless you have something on the agenda that says this is your chance, this is when you can come up and speak, people don't get a chance to do it. And then also having a limit on it isn't unreasonable. I think you could go to any court and say, hey, we offered it. There is a limit, but we did offer it. So I think that that idea in Senator Carson's bill is a good one. So back to the school board. When I wasn't chair, we had run into difficulties where the chairman or chairwoman would not allow people to speak. And it was very, very frustrating to me. They would be shut down. They were told that it's the business of the board. It's the business of the school district. We need to conduct that business. It's not the business of the board or the school district. It's the business of the community. And they are the board of directors of in our case, $77 million business that happens to be a school district. And I believe that the people that pay the bills for that deserve the right to come up and speak. So what I would do as a member of the board is I would make a motion, not all the time, but when it was very, very clear we needed to open up public comment so people could speak on an issue, I would make a motion to do so. And I would make that motion to do so and have it be open until the end of the meeting so that we didn't have to keep coming up and making motions. You know what's odd about that? Is whenever I did that, we got a unanimous vote. All 5 members said yes, people can come up and speak. Even the chairman or chairwoman that wouldn't allow it in the first place. And so from that point on, people during the meeting got to come up. But we shouldn't have to have a board member have the nerve to make a special motion in order to get people to be able to speak. I love you guys talking about the fact that during the meeting, wouldn't it be nice to open it up so people could speak about things? I'll tell you, in our school district, that's just not something that's normally going to ever happen. People are shut down. That's the end of it. The board now has even gotten to the point where they will recess the meeting if people will not shut up. And they'll walk out of the room. And I think that that's disgusting, if not criminal. So I wanted to speak on the issue of the making sure that we have some sort of public comment. I think that it's reasonable. There's nothing wrong with it.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Any questions from the members? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to share your story with us. So being somebody who's very experienced in being on many different boards and having many different types of public comment, are you able to address some of the questions that we brought up? Because if we're to pass this, I would just want to make sure that we pass it so it actually does what we want it to do, is allow people to make comment on agenda items that they, one, know about, and to make a comment before any action's taken.
I believe that the number one, at the absolute minimum, the first item or second item, because I'll agree with the School Board Association on this, the board often does have students that come into the room to do presentations. As a matter of fact, our presentations and announcements pretty much allows for that. So having the first or second item, probably the second, be clearly, maybe the first item is presentations and announcements. The second item is public comment, just clearly stated. That's what it is. And you can have a limit to it. I don't know if 30 minutes is reasonable. I think the other premise of the School Board Association is a bit silly. If the public comment goes for 15 minutes, we're not going to all sit there in our chairs until the next agenda item comes up on the clock, even if the clock isn't running, we're going to move on to the next item in the meeting. And as a small community, if somebody comes into the room and missed the meeting, a reasonable chairperson would open it up to them at a convenient point. So that absolutely is required. It has to be clear, it has to state its public comment, and it can be after the kiddos come up and do their stuff. I like the idea of having one last, at the end of the meeting, having an open, any further public comment. That would be great, but I could live without it in my 18 years on the school board. The one that interests me, that I think everybody's afraid to touch or go near, is this concept of, let's say the school district is talking about a kindergarten program and expanding it to full day. We only have half day in Londonderry. And you get to the end of that presentation, if it's not a public hearing, our chairwoman or chairman will never allow public comment. It's not going to happen. If I were the chairperson, I would absolutely allow it, because it's time to talk about it. We just heard a presentation on it. Any more questions? Any more ideas? That, I think, is required. How do you codify that into an RSA? I just don't know. To me, any man on the street should think it's reasonable that we open that up. Our town council does it in Londonderry. If there's an issue about water or the trash service in the community, and they get to the end of the discussion, the chairman there will open it up and say, is there anybody that really wants to, come in on this? And they do it, but they do it as a matter of course. I don't know why the school districts can't. It's not the business of the school district. It's not the school district's meeting. It's not the district office's meeting. It's not even the chairman's meeting. I learned in school district training from the School Board Association, the chairman has absolutely no power stronger than any other member of that board, except that they run the meeting and they set the agenda. So I think it would be nice to have more open communications. The school board belongs, the school district belongs to the community.
Any other comments, questions? Senator Carr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Young. It sounds like that there's a principle here of public comment ought to be offered, the period, some type of opportunity for public comment ought to be available. It sounds like a good principle that probably everyone could agree to. The timing of it, the order in the agenda seems secondary to what the principle, to the principle.
I'll agree with that, but what your question, and that potentially should be determined at the local level, and it can be part of the policies and procedures book that the board publishes and is responsible for passing those policies and procedures after a series of 3 hearings. So if they have guidance to say you must have at least one public comment section, and you must take into account the ability for people to speak following major items, even if it's not a public hearing, I think that the board could then be responsible enough to write its own laws and to publish its own policies and procedures, so it's there in the book. But being there in the book, go back to the Manchester Airport time, when I was on the board, the first few years, they gave us a book as a gift, and our name was in the book, and all the names of all the people on all the committees in the book. And I was a lot younger then. I thought, wow, isn't that cool? There's my name in a book, and it's the book from the city. I think it still sits on the entry-level desk at my home. But what the book was, it was RS-91A. And I'll tell you, I read that book. And I became self-proclaimed Mr. 91A in our school board.
We need you here.
Yeah, and in our meetings, if any other board member started, whether I was chair or not, started to discuss about another board member, started to discuss about themselves, started to discuss stuff that should be done in public, I referred to 91A and that book and the chapter, and it's just, there's something about having it in a book or having it in a law that people will make it happen. Too much detail, again, I love local control, but we were able to get away for the 18 years I was on the board, and I'm sure the many years before, well, it would have been 21 years because I sat on the budget committee looking at the school board, and they always had presentations and announcements, and they never had public comment. Maybe they still don't, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we all set?
Mr. 918.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Need
Young.
any help on 91A? That's a big one on me. Thank you.
Bob Slater.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm not going to follow up with a long history like Mr. Young. I'm from Londonderry as well. I'm on current school board member speaking here on behalf of myself. It's been a rough couple of years here, and a lot of this has come to light on public comment. And the problem you got is inconsistency. You know, this week we're going with public comment after announcements and presentations. 2 weeks from now, because we had some disruptions, we're going to the end of the meeting, which happened to be 10:30, 11:15 at night. So I think having the consistency up front, we have a big over 55 community. We get a lot of people that come in and voice their opinions, concerns about school districts and funds and that. So having that set time for public comment at the beginning of the meeting for public comment, not regarding any deliberations coming forward, or a parent may have some issues that they'd like to express to the school board, and then deliberations come after this point, I think is important to have that established. And just as of, I'm going to say about 60 days ago, to Mr. Young's point, we didn't have public comment spelled out, because we would get several emails before the meeting. There's no public comment on the agenda. Why? It was never listed there. For 18 years that he served on the board, it was under announcements, presentations, and questions. But it was always allowed back then up till the past 2 years. It's been, I would say the last 8 months have been the worst out of that. So to that point, about 60 days ago, I proposed that we definitely put public comment on our agenda so people know it's there. It stops any confusion, questions. So we have presentations, announcements, and then we have public comment. And just as of late, after going back and forth to the end of the meeting, and what we had done prior to, you know, the past couple of years is if we have deliberation 6.1, 6.2, and you know, the presentation would be given either by finance or whoever may be giving it. And typically, a board member would ask if there was people in the audience, any public comment on this deliberation. And that's the right way to do it on anything there. So anyone that's speaking at public comment early can talk about that. If they're going to stay for deliberations, we would try to make sure that it was opened up to the public for those certain discussions, because that's important as well. So I think Senator Carson's bill, making sure that this is part of an RSA, that we can make sure every school board gives the community that time to speak. 30 minutes has worked out well for us. That's what we usually do, 3 minutes. And we've never really denied. We've gotten close to 30 minutes in the past 6 months. With everything that's going on in the schools today. But it is so important to hear from the parents and that. And if we can't answer their question, we would never answer the questions until I asked to, let's please, if we can address these parents' questions while we're here, or if there's somebody from district office here that can answer that question, let's take that few minutes, stop their time, address it, and move on so we can try to keep some peace in the community. As you know, there's hundreds of emails flying, you know, with all the openings and everything going on. And that seemed to calm things down. So the more you listen and give people the opportunity, it seemed to calm the waters. They heard, and that, because it got way beyond whether it's masks, this, that, or it was really affecting the education part and now the social and emotional part. So it was good to listen to some of these parents, especially, you know, to my colleagues. You know, sometimes you don't really hear all of it or see all of it, but when you can listen to these parents that are feeling it because they feel as though this is being done and this is affecting my child, it makes us work even harder with district office to make sure the community and their children are getting their education. But I felt as though once we put public comment on the agenda, which we never had up to what Mr. Young had said, everything seemed to calm down. There was a time, and what had happened prior to this is we'd have public comment, we put it to the end of the meeting, then all of a sudden, before the meeting started, the chair at the time would say, I'm gonna amend the agenda and put public comment at the beginning tonight. I'm like, well, people probably aren't gonna get here till 9 o'clock. They know we got 2 hours of deliberations here, so you may have to open it. But, you know, we did. The chair had made a motion. We agreed, because there was people sitting there. You want to let them be heard. And then I just made a motion at the end to the chair. Can you just recognize anyone that may have come late and missed public comment, because we changed the agenda. But I think at the beginning for our over 55 community, any parents that have children at home that just want to come in and speak at 7:15, 7:30, you know, come in, feel better about what they said, got their opinion out in public, on record. You know, and a lot of districts, like, you know, you can email the board whatever you want, but it's not the same. If they really have something heartfelt or something concerning that's going on in the school or the district, they want to be heard, they want to be on record, and they want to spend some time in front of the 5 elected officials and voice their concerns or what they're there about. So I think if there was some type of format, you know, set in an RSA that says, yes, 30 minutes of public comment at the beginning of the meeting to some sort of effect, so there was a structure for all school boards, because we could have a new chair in March after the elections, and that chair could decide to change the format. That's the chair's obligation with the superintendent to set the agenda. And that's what's happened over the last year. It's changed meeting to meeting to meeting. And it just gets very disruptive for the community, as well as colleagues on the board that may not want to change. And why change? Let's be able to handle it. Let's keep sustainability in our agenda, so they show that we are elected here and we will handle anything that's thrown at us, you know, in a professional manner to deal with the parents. So I would look to the committee in that to support this, to have something in control of local school boards, just to give them some guidance that this is required.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Comments from the committee members?
Okay.
I guess you did very well. There
All
are no
right.
comments or questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Diana Fenton, do you want to talk about the Code of Ethics?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. For the record, my name is Diana Fenton. I'm an attorney with the Department of Education, and I would love that book on the right to know law, because I need as much help as I can get. And I've dealt with them for years. So I will speak to you briefly about the School Board Code of Ethics portion of this proposed bill in front of you. To be clear, the Board of Education does not have direct oversight on school boards. We have oversight over educators. We don't have oversight on school board members. They are elected officials, and as such are governed by the ballot box. And there are some statutes that talk about when they can be removed from office, and it's a very narrowly defined reason. As you all know, the department did create a code of ethics and a code of conduct for educators. The Code of Ethics, as Mayor Christina alluded to in his testimony, is aspirational in nature. It cannot be acted upon. The Code of Conduct can be. And so the department created those documents. The Code of Conduct was created pursuant to law that was passed. It was a House bill passed by this committee, this legislative body. But again, these are elected officials. There are already rules that govern that. The department does not oversee this group of individuals. And as Mayor Christina mentioned, there was a House bill similar to this 2 sessions ago, and the department testified that, again, we don't have oversight over them, and we have nothing to impose if anything were to be violated. The reason it works for the Code of Conduct for educators is there is a credential attached, but we do not have a similar mechanism for school board members. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Anybody else who have something to say, who would add anything to this bill? Seeing none, then I will close this hearing. Thank you all for coming. What time is it? 10:57, we have a whole hour. I keep looking at the clock. Just finish writing up here. For AG, K, finish writing my notes. Do I have a motion for executive session?
Or is that for tomorrow and,
And then, but not come back.
The committee is taking a 5-minute recess. We are back from recess. And let's see. We have an option. We can exact a couple of bills today, or I can give you a list of bills that are ready to be exact, and we can all do them tomorrow, so you have a choice. Would you like to see the list of bills that we're going to do tomorrow?
Sure, I actually been circling ones that need exec action, but tell me which ones.
231,
231, and this, all right.
235, 237, 238, 351, 381, 386, 394, and 432.
This one between 351 and 386.
381 and 386.
Between 351 and 386, is there another one?
381,
Oh, we are doing 381 FM?
yeah.
Okay.
And 231, we have the amendment of Senator Sherman.
So we have a few amendments, just for everybody's information for tomorrow. We have an amendment, the one that Senator Carson referenced today on Senate Bill 410. We have an amendment that Senator Sherman referenced, which sounds like it's going to change, but still, Senate Bill 453. We have an amendment to Senate Bill 231, which is from Senator Sherman. Yeah?
Which was the second one you mentioned?
We have 410, 453, which is Senator Sherman's, but that sounds like it's going to change based on the testimony today. 231, which is Senator Sherman's. Senate Bill 351, which is from Senator Khan. And Senate Bill 394, which is from Senator Khan. Senator Ward, I know, is drafting an amendment that has not been released from OLS yet, but should be available tomorrow on Senate Bill 238.
238, that's the MOU between the charter school and the sending district. 231, that's Sherman's.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think there's one bill we could do easily today, and that's 386. I don't know if anybody had any issues with that during the hearing. That was the department requested language change bill.
Okay. Are you okay with that?
That was the
The department had requested that.
Yep.
386.
That was the bill I was going to go see if there was additional information from a local school district. I did that, and I don't have anything to add or delete from the bill as presented.
If that's the case, we should motion to go into exec so we can continue this dialogue.
I'll move to go into executive session.
I'll second the
Thank
motion.
you, Ava.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, you said 386?
Yes, so I move ought to pass on 386.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, that was the one required
Oh,
technical changes to the determination of
wanted to say
tuition
aye.
amounts. Senator Khan,
no, nothing to add.
Senator Prentice?
Oh, yes.
No, I'm
Yes.
just asking if you have, if you want to discuss it further.
I did. I'm having, I think you need to activate.
No, I was just, I was going back to the days of roll call vote, sorry.
which
So
we're
we have
doing
an-
now.
An ought to pass on 386. Do we have a second?
I seconded.
Seconded
Second for
from Rashadi. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So
Aye.
it's 5-0.
Move consent?
Second.
And move to consent.
I'd sort of like to hear Senator
We got
Hennessy
the-
explain this on the floor.
So all those in favor of
I have no
consent?
objection.
Aye.
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 So that one go consent, and do you want to take it out, Senator Hennessy?
Yes, I'm happy to take it out.
Senator Hennessy will take it out.
Ava, I did that for you.
Okay, so that's. And I would suggest that the numbers that I gave you, that you go over them, review them, and so we can just quickly go through them tomorrow in the executive session. Is that acceptable? Yep. Excellent.
It works for me. I think some of them are worthy of discussion. So I'd love to go through as quickly as we can, but I think
Yeah, are
it'd be
we all
helpful to
set
discuss.
with the disability, the 21 years of age that you and I had discussed? And
If you wanted to take that up now, I'm willing to offer an ought to pass.
I can't hear you.
I'm willing to offer an ought to pass, and I believe that's.
Do you want to do that now?
If you are interested in that. No.
I think we're still waiting for information on that one. Hold on, which number is that?
Is that 394?
Yes. I have an amendment on that which changes
Yeah,
the
could we-
implementation date.
That was just the effective date.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was part of the testimony.
Okay, we're
So if
talking
you want to do it tomorrow, that's fine too.
SB 394. Do I have a motion?
I would move on to pass just so that we can get the amendment out there. But again, ready to do it.
Senator
I am.
Khan moves out to pass. I'll second that. Any discussion on it?
Um,
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe we're still waiting for some information on this. I'm okay with voting on it, knowing that this will go to finance, but the department, we had requested that the department get us the impact to adequate education payments and the impact to local districts on this, because it was not included in the fiscal note.
Okay. So do you want to take that up in fiscal later, or when were they going to give it to us?
Yeah,
I would've-
we've had several weeks
Yeah.
go by and no information. I even called on Friday this last week and left a message, but I
Okay.
don't have any info.
So I support the policy of this, so I'll be voting in favor of it. I just, knowing that this is going to go to finance, there may be some additional information that comes to light, since we don't actually have the finances on this yet, that may cause me to change a vote at some point on this. So just so you know, policy-wise, education-wise, I am in favor of the 21 years of age change. But since we don't have the finance information, it should go to finance. We should assess the local impact and revote after we have that information.
Vote on this bill after it.
Well, that'll be when it comes out of finance.
Right. Ava, is that something you can do? Call them up? Are you, who's going to call them up and ask them to please forward the information?
They'll have to bring it to the finance committee.
I know, but do they need to be prodded to bring it?
Yeah, we'll prod them. Yeah.
I think they need to be prodded. I mean,
So my question was who's going to prod them?
I did on Friday. I can follow up, but I think maybe Ava, if you did on behalf of the committee.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay,
So
So-
just,
we'll hold off on this one? No, okay, fine, we'll just get the information to fiscal. Beautiful.
I would like to, Madam Chair, I'd like to offer an amendment to 394, Amendment 0332. Changing the effective date to July 1, 2023.
if you don't have it, I have another copy.
Do you have a motion on the amendment?
I'll move on to pass on the amendment.
Second?
Order passing the amendment, we have first and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Yes, 5-0, passing the amendment.
Oh, Senator, oh, Senator Prentice,
It's an amendment.
it changes the effective date.
It's just. No.
So we have accepted the amendment, now we're going to look at the bill. We already have a motion to pass, and now we have a ought to pass with the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposition, anybody opposed? Do you want to put that on consent?
Can we talk about that for a second? I think there's just been,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you with this noise outside.
yeah, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. Relative to putting this on consent,
We can hold off on it.
yeah, I think it's worth a comment
okay.
on the floor.
Okay,
What's been good about this is that the parties that might object, the special education constituencies, have more or less given us letters of support. So I think we have pretty good consensus on this. And there is a bill in the House. It's not this bill. We made mention of that during the hearing. And because of that, no doubt there'll be something coming back to the Senate from
right.
our consideration of the House bill. So I think setting up a little bit of conversation so that
Okay,
our colleagues are aware of it is going to be helpful, and then it's going to go to finance anyway.
yep,
So I think trying to set the stage for what the policy is accomplishing and how the constituencies have come to an agreement on it, I think is valuable.
so do you want to take it out?
I'd be glad, well, I won't mind if somebody else takes it out. I'll certainly speak to it.
I'll be happy to take it out, if you don't want to.
Uh,
Do you have enough things to take out?
No, I'll take it out. I mean,
Yes.
if you want to take it out and.
I'll be
and
happy to.
Why don't you take it out and
Okay.
I'll speak in support of it, and there we
Okay.
go. We've got a tag team.
Love it. So just to clarify, Senator Prentice, for the record, you voted yes on the amendment 0332S.
I did, yes.
Okay, that takes care of two of them.
Ava, when we get to 231, I don't know that I've got the amendment. I guess I'll look before you stretch for
Move
it.
to go out of executive session.
He gave it out this
How about
morning.
381?
Yes.
Senator Hennessy, that was your motion? Leave executive session. We leaving executive session? All right.
How do you feel about 381? Do you want to do one more?
Let's look at that. That might look at it to see if it needs one.
Amendment to which one?
81, so I'm not ready for that one.
You're not? Okay. Which amendment do you want?
I'm not ready to vote on that.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yes.
Then do I have a motion to get out of executive session? I know. But let's speak loud enough.
I'll move we come out of executive session.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
And we'll also finish the public hearing on
I
these
still don't
bills.
get it.
Get out, amend to, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.